Thank you, Chairman Warren and Ranking Member Van Holland. Thanks for holding this hearing. Welcome, General Bondi. Thank you, sir. Good to see you. I want to raise with you something that's been deeply concerning to me, General Bondi. The 2024 Democrat nominee for vice president actually called federal immigration agents Donald Trump's modern day Gestapo. This is dangerous for our agents. It's wrong and it cuts against and it undercuts the rule of law. So I want to ask you a series of questions, General Bondi, and if you would accommodate me, I would appreciate it. First, you'll agree when a bill is passed by Congress and signed by the president, it's law, right? Yes, Senator. And until that law is changed, by Congress, you have a duty to follow it, right? That's what the rule of law is. So let me read the law. Now let's get to something that's just shocking. Attorney General Pam Bondi has just faced a brutal 1-2 punch in federal court, and it's exposed some alarming new details about her involvement in Trump's revenge prosecutions. Her legal and political prospects are looking pretty dire. Federal judges have laid out what they called a disturbing pattern of misconduct right in open court. We're looking at an unlawfully appointed prosecutor and grand jury irregularities, so severe that the judges are questioning whether the grand jury ever actually reviewed the final charging documents. Then there's the evidence mishandling that would be embarrassing in any legal case. And here's the kicker. There's security footage, actual video from the courthouse showing Bondi leaving with boxes of documents right after a judge ordered her to preserve that evidence. The timestamps match up perfectly with case files that investigators later claimed they couldn't find. It's hard to believe that the Attorney General of the United States might have been caught on camera taking evidence out of a courthouse just after being ordered to keep it safe. We're talking hard evidence here with video footage that tells a pretty damning story. So let me share some big news that just came out. The cases against James Comey and Letitia James, who are two major targets for Trump, have completely fallen apart. It wasn't just a simple dismissal by federal judges. They really tore apart the whole legal setup that Pam Bondi's Justice Department created. Senior Judge Cameron McGowan Curry discovered that the interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, who was appointed by Bondi and Trump, was actually unlawfully appointed from the start. The judge ruled that everything stemming from Halligan's faulty appointment, including the securing and signing of those indictments, was an illegal exercise of executive power, so everything is thrown out. Just think about the implications here. The person who signed those indictments against Comey and James didn't even have the legal right to do so. Every single action taken by her was invalid right from the beginning. Talk about a shaky foundation for a prosecution. It's clear that the entire case has been tossed away, and it wasn't even a close call. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice. President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General Pam Bondi vowed not to use the U.S. Justice Department to target people based on their politics if she's confirmed for the position. But she dodged direct questions about investigating people scorned by the president-elect during her testimony on Wednesday before the Senate Judiciary Committee considering her nomination. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation, but the issues don't stop there for Bondi. In another ruling, Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick took a look at the grand jury proceedings related to Comey and spotted a concerning pattern of major investigative blunders. That's some pretty serious language coming from a federal judge, profound investigative missteps. He found that there were fundamental misstatements of the law presented to the grand jury, as well as evidence of potentially privileged material being mishandled. It's honestly hard to believe the extent of what's come to light. Let's break down what's been happening regarding Pam Bondi and the courtroom chaos. So, a judge came down hard on the indictment process, finding it so jumbled that it's nearly impossible to tell if the grand jury even saw the final charges they were supposed to approve. Grand juries are meant to act like a safety net against any misuse of power from prosecutors. They're there to review evidence and determine if there's enough to bring charges. However, this judge pointed out that in the Comey case, the grand jury was misled about the law and might not have ever seen the actual indictment. This isn't just a small mistake. It strikes at the heart of what grand juries are supposed to do to protect folks from politically motivated prosecutions like those from Bondi's Department of Justice. Now let's talk about the security footage. This part really takes things from being a legal mess to a serious potential scandal. After a judge insisted on full disclosure and keeping evidence safe, courthouse cameras caught Bondi leaving with boxes filled with what many are calling vital evidence. The timestamps on that footage match up perfectly with case files that investigators later said were missing, so the files were there. The judge wanted them kept intact. And yet, Bondi walked out with those boxes, leaving the files gone. This has commentators buzzing about possible obstruction of justice and destroying evidence. If any regular person were caught on camera taking evidence after a preservation order, they'd be in a heap of trouble. It's ironic because the Attorney General is supposed to be the one enforcing laws against obstruction and evidence tampering, and here she appears to be caught on tape doing precisely what she should be prosecuting others for. The fallout from these judicial findings is monumental for the credibility of the Justice Department, with many commentators labeling the combined outcomes as a severe knock against Bondi's department. The prosecutions have now been tagged as illegal, retaliatory, and fundamentally flawed. With Cam and James cleared, Bondi is now looking at complaints against her bar license and potential criminal investigations, all of which raise serious doubts about whether any case she's involved in can be trusted. This is pretty significant since Bondi is heavily involved in several high-profile cases, including the Epstein files, SNAP benefits litigation, and immigration enforcement, to name a few. If judges are uncovering this level of misconduct in the so-called revenge prosecutions, it really makes you wonder what other missteps might be lurking beneath the surface. It's pretty shocking when you think about it, but it seems like everything was built on shaky ground for Pam Bondi and her crew at the Trump Justice Department. So let's break it down a bit. First off, we need to talk about Lindsay Hallen, the interim U.S. attorney who was supposed to be handling some serious cases against James Comey and Letitia James. Bondi and Trump picked her out specifically for these high-profile prosecutions aimed at their political opponents. However, there was a catch. Halligan's appointment didn't actually follow the legal rules that are in place for who can act as a U.S. attorney. These laws exist to prevent presidents from simply popping their political buddies into these powerful roles without the necessary Senate confirmation or protective measures. According to Judge Curry, Halligan's appointment wasn't legal, meaning she didn't have the authority to wield the powers of a U.S. attorney. What does this mean for all the actions she took while in that role? Well, Judge Curry didn't hold back. She declared that everything stemming from H. Halligan's faulty appointment, including those indictments, was simply unlawful and should be dismissed. This isn't just a minor oversight or something that can be brushed off or appealed. No, it's clear from the judge's remarks that the entire structure around those indictments was fundamentally flawed from the get-go. It's not just that the legal reasoning behind them was suspect or lacking. They were signed by someone without any real legal power. It's kind of like if a random person off the street just strolled into the U.S. Attorney's office and started signing documents. The whole situation reflects either a total breakdown in legal procedure or a willful ignoring of the rules. So it's honestly hard to believe they thought they could get away with this. The issues surrounding the grand jury and the Comey case have left quite a mark, and really they're pretty shocking. Judge Fitzpatrick pointed out some serious problems that make you question the integrity of the whole process. Grand jury proceedings are supposed to be this important check on the power of prosecutors. With ordinary citizens taking a good look at the evidence to decide if anything warrants actual charges before putting someone through the hassle and stress of a criminal trial, prosecutors are expected to be honest, to follow all the right procedures, and to make sure the grand jury actually reviews and gives the green light on charges before they're officially filed. But according to Judge Fitzpatrick, that didn't happen in this case at all. He discovered that the prosecutors misrepresented fundamental aspects of the law to the grand jurors, which means they might have been led to approve charges based on false legal standards. That's not just aggressive prosecution, it's straight up misleading the grand jury. Adding fuel to the fire, the judge noticed that potentially privileged information was improperly presented to the grand jury. Legal protections exist for a reason. They ensure certain communications remain confidential. When prosecutors put privileged material in front of grand jurors, it doesn't just break those protections, it messes with the entire procedure. If grand jurors see information they shouldn't, it can sway their decisions based on facts they really should never have known. Then there's the chaotic indictment process that Fitzpatrick talked about, which raises all sorts of questions about whether the grand jury even had a chance to see and approve the specific charges filed. In a normal situation, the grand jury looks over a proposed indictment and votes on whether to approve it. But according to the judge, everything was so jumbled that it's uncertain if that vital step actually took place. It's possible the indictment was pushed through without the grand jury ever seeing the final version, meaning the charges might not have been approved properly at all. The judge described this situation as a disturbing pattern of profound investigative missteps, which clearly shows just how serious he thought these issues were. This isn't just one mistake in isolation, it's a recurring theme that raises plenty of red flags. So let me tell you about a pretty eye-opening situation that unfolded in the courtroom. It all started when Judge Fitzpatrick used some serious language that really shook things up. Federal judges aren't known for throwing around strong words lightly. Their statements become part of the permanent record and can be referred to in future cases. By choosing his words so carefully, the judge was making it clear that what he found was not just a little hiccup. It was a major issue that struck at the heart of what makes prosecutions fair and just. Under Pam Bondi's leadership, the Justice Department wasn't merely losing cases. They were getting called out in public for some pretty fundamental missteps in how they handled investigations and prosecutions. Now, let's shift gears and talk about where this all took a turn for the worse: security footage. This part of the story is where it potentially goes from a legal mess to something a lot more serious. After a judge ordered full disclosure and preservation of crucial evidence, the security cameras in the courthouse captured none other than Pam Bondi leaving the building while carrying boxes filled with what crucial evidence. The timing is just everything here. The footage shows her making her exit just after the preservation order was put in place. Investigators later found they couldn't track down case files that should have been in those very boxes. Everything lines up perfectly. A judge orders preservation. Bondi leaves with the boxes and poof, the files go missing. You really don't need to be a legal expert to see how fishy that looks. When evidence just vanishes right after an order to preserve it, and there's video footage of someone hauling boxes out of where that evidence was kept, that's basically textbook obstruction of justice. It's downright ironic that the Attorney General might be involved in something like evidence destruction. After all, Bondi's role is to uphold federal laws, including those against obstruction and evidence tampering. She's the one whose job is overseeing prosecutors who charge others for the very behavior she seems to be caught red-handed doing herself. Defense attorneys nationwide are going to have a blast with this situation. Whenever a federal prosecutor accuses someone of obstruction or messing with evidence, the defense can simply point to the Attorney General doing just that and facing no repercussions. It really raises the question, how can the Justice Department credibly pursue anyone for these crimes when its own leader is caught on camera behaving the same way? It's really something how this whole situation has turned completely upside down, showcasing the failure of Trump's revenge prosecution strategy. These cases were supposed to be the shining stars in their quest to target political adversaries. Consider figures like Comey, the former FBI director who was blamed for the Russia investigation, and Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, who was gone after Trump's business dealings. These were exactly the folks Trump wanted prosecuted the most. Initially, Pam Bondi delivered some indictments, and you could almost hear the cheers from the base. It really looked like their revenge agenda was on track, but now that plan lies in ruins. Not only have these prosecutions failed, but federal judges have also labeled them as illegal, procedurally flawed, and rooted in unlawful uses of executive power. It's not just a case of things not working out. It ended up backfiring and exposing the administration to serious legal and political repercussions. The fallout for Bondi and her team in the Justice Department is pretty severe. If they were this careless and willing to bend the rules in high-profile cases, you have to wonder what was happening with cases that didn't get as much attention. How many other prosecutions are built on similar shaky grounds? How many interim appointments are questionable? And how many grand juries were misled about the law? It feels like the issues that judges found in the Comey and James cases might just scratch the surface of a much bigger problem, which should definitely raise eyebrows for anyone who cares about a fair justice system, not just those on one side of the political spectrum. Bondi's credibility is pretty much shot on several fronts now. She's become the face of the Justice Department when it comes to the Epstein files, but how can anyone trust her when she's been accused of removing evidence from a courthouse? She's also trying to defend the administration and handle SNAP benefits litigation, but it's hard to see how courts can take her words seriously given the level of misconduct exposed in other cases. Plus, she's overseeing immigration enforcement and other hot button policies. But with her actions under investigation, how can Congress or the public trust her testimony? The harsh criticism from federal judges doesn't just impact the Comey and James cases, it casts a shadow over everything Bondi is involved with. Every statement she makes, every filing her department submits, and every claim she puts forward is now viewed in light of judges labeling her operation as deeply concerning. Here's the scoop on what went down with Pam Bondi, and it's pretty wild. First off, a senior judge named Cameron McGowan Curry dismissed the indictments against James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James because he discovered that interim U.S. Attorney Lince Halligan wasn't lawfully appointed. This means that everything she did, like signing off on some pretty important indictments, was illegal from the get-go. It's not just a matter of lacking evidence or weak legal arguments. It's much more serious. The whole thing was based on a faulty foundation, and now those prosecutions are completely tossed out. Then there's the second part. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick pointed out some seriously disturbing investigative missteps during the Comey grand jury proceedings. We're talking about significant misstatements of law and the improper use of potentially privileged materials, leading to a chaotic indictment process. It's claimed that the grand jury might not have even seen the final charging document. This judge's words were pretty blunt. Prosecutors misled the grand jury about the legal requirements and possibly filed charges without proper approval. Grand juries are there to shield people from unfair prosecutions, and when prosecutors mess that up, they're breaking more than just a few rules. They're attacking a core protection that everyone should have. Lastly, there's this security footage that shows Bondi leaving the courthouse with boxes full of documents right after a judge ordered that evidence be preserved. The timing here is key as it matches up perfectly with case files that later turned up missing. This is a significant moment since it's the Attorney General of the United States apparently caught on videotaking evidence right after being instructed to preserve it. If an average person pulled something like this, they'd probably be facing serious charges like obstruction of justice or tampering with evidence. So here's the thing. There's a lot of chatter about how the Justice Department's actions really mirror what they usually go after others for. It's not just any ordinary situation. Defense lawyers are definitely going to pull this up every time prosecutors try to pin similar charges on their clients. If the Attorney General can get away with it, that raises a huge question about why anyone else should face punishment for the same behavior. Then there's the news about the judge's rulings, which folks are calling a pretty harsh slap on the wrist for Pam Bondi and her department. They're painting the prosecutions as not just unfair, but illegal retaliation, and the whole process looks pretty shady. Meanwhile, Comey and James are coming out on the other side of this. While Bondi is left vulnerable, she's now facing possible complaints to the bar and even criminal investigations herself. What was supposed to be a power play for Trump to go after his perceived enemies has backfired spectacularly, flipping the narrative completely. Instead of Comey and James in the hot seat, it's Bondi who's under fire for her own actions, which could cost her professionally and maybe even legally. And get this, as Bondi's credibility takes a nosedive, it's happening right when she's in the spotlight dealing with sensitive stuff like the Epstein files, SNAP benefits, legal battles, and immigration enforcement. It's no wonder people are starting to wonder if any investigation she leads can really be trusted. If judges are finding this level of misconduct in the prosecutions that were supposed to be retaliation, it makes you think about what else might be going wrong behind the scenes. It raises some serious doubts about how Congress can trust her testimony, how courts can view the Justice Department's filings, and frankly, how the public can have any confidence in what the Justice Department says. This whole situation isn't just about these specific cases. It casts a shadow over everything Bondi's department is doing. So when we step back and look at the bigger picture, these rulings represent a pivotal point in the ongoing struggle about whether Trump can actually use federal law enforcement as a weapon against people he views as threats. The game plan was clear. Use the Justice Department to go after anyone who dared oppose Trump, to intimidate anyone else considering standing up to him, and to portray his critics as criminals rather than legitimate political rivals. Bondi was meant to be the one to deliver those convictions that would underpin Trump's claims about his enemies being law-breakers. What really happened is more like a legal disaster for Pam Bondi, and it has opened up her administration to the kind of scrutiny it was desperately trying to avoid. It turns out that courts aren't just going to sit back and let the Department of Justice get away with misconduct, even when they're targeting people who aren't exactly popular in Trump's circle. Judges had every chance to overlook the issues. They could have found some technical loophole to let those problematic prosecutions go on. But instead, they took a close look at the details, uncovered serious flaws, and ended up issuing rulings that didn't just toss the cases aside. They thoroughly documented the misconduct, laying it out in a way that can't be ignored. And that documentation is crucial because it establishes a permanent record. Historians in the future will have a clear view of what Bondi's DOJ was up to and how judges described it. The troubling pattern of major investigative blunders will shadow Bondi throughout her career. She's in a tough spot personally, too. Bar associations across several states might start looking into her actions. If that security footage shows what it seems to show, like an attorney messing with evidence after being ordered to preserve it, that could lead to disbarment. But it doesn't end there. There's also the possibility of criminal charges. Tampering with evidence and obstructing justice are serious federal offenses, and the Attorney General isn't untouchable. If evidence points to her involvement in any of that, future Justice Departments or special counsel could step in and file charges. The very laws she's meant to uphold could come back to bite her if the proof is there. For the folks Bondi was trying to go after, this recent turn of events feels like a complete exoneration. Take James Comey, for example. He was accused of crimes by an administration that wanted to retaliate for his involvement in the Trump investigations. Now, a federal judge has said that the prosecution was in fact unlawful. Letitia James faced her own troubles with civil cases against Trump's business ventures, but now she's off the hook for any federal charges and can argue that the administration was guilty of political persecution. This isn't just about winning in the courts. It's a matter of moral victory. The outcomes confirm what both Comey and James have been saying all along. Those prosecutions were really about punishing political adversaries, not about pursuing real law enforcement based on actual crimes. These rulings send a mixed message to other critics of Trump. You know, there's a lot going on with Pam Bondi and the whole situation in federal court. It seems like the administration was really set on going after anyone who opposed Trump, pushing a revenge agenda. But what we've seen lately shows that those prosecutions can fall apart when they're based on misconduct and legal flaws. The courts are starting to push back, which is a bit refreshing. There's still some resistance to abuse, even if it's not a foolproof guarantee. Going through a federal prosecution is tough, though, expensive, stressful, and it leaves scars even if you come out on top. But the reality is that Trump and Bondi can't just slap indictments on people and expect to win all the time. Just look at what happened with Bondi. She suffered a massive setback in court that revealed some pretty concerning misconduct tied to Trump's revenge prosecutions. Judges uncovered that the prosecutor responsible for the indictments was actually unlawfully appointed. There were also some serious misstatements of law and procedural chaos in the grand jury proceedings, which made the whole prosecutorial process illegitimate from the get-go. Adding to the drama, there's security footage suggesting that Bondi removed evidence from the courthouse right after a preservation order with missing files that investigators couldn't track down. The cases against figures like James Comey and Letitia James have been tossed out completely.